An American rocket on a return trip from Venus crashes into the Mediterranean off the coast of Sicily, and the alien egg it brings back hatches with predictable results. Scientists, the military, Ray Harryhausen, and more than a few ethnic stereotypes are deployed in this week's episode of Movie Bones, 20 million miles to Earth. Ryan, why is it always so costly for man to move from the present to the future?
I don't know, Justin. I don't know.
And if you're looking for the answer to that question, this film doesn't have it either. So, folks, this week's film is 20 Million Miles to Earth. It stars William Hopper as Colonel Robert Calder, Joan Taylor as Marissa Leonardo, Frank Puglia as Dr. Leonardo, and Arthur Space as, I kid you not, Dr. Sharman. Apparently, the toilet paper magnet hadn't been created yet. At least I'm hoping not. Otherwise, that's a really awkward way to name your characters for the time. But yes, Dr. Sharman. But really, the movie centers on a team that came back from the first trip astronauts took to Venus, and they crashed in the Mediterranean just off the coast of Sicily, where there's a bunch of fishermen. They rescue a couple of the guys, and the annoying kid finds the specimen that they brought back with them. He absconds with it, it hatches, and it grows up, and it causes chaos, and really, do I have to go on? This is the plot from so many B movies. The point of these movies, for me at least, isn't the fact that you have to go into a lot of detail about the plot. A lot of them are all the same anyway. But what makes them interesting, at least for me, is the fact that they tend to be really awful in sometimes in really unique ways, and I derive pleasure from these kind of things. And I'm a weirdo like that, but Ryan, are you a weirdo like that?
I would say that I am definitely different in that regard.
You're more like the people who just look at a bad B movie and say it's a bad movie.
Yeah, I very much am like that. There are certain movies out there that I will say that, like, no matter how bad they are, they're my favorite types of movies. For instance, my favorite bad movies are the Adam Sandler bad movies. And I'm talking like if you've ever heard of Grown Ups 1 and Grown Ups 2.
I have heard of them.
I will sit down and watch those movies. So, like, those are my favorite types of bad B movies. They got to, like, be, like, comedic with a lot of heart put into them. A lot of heart, like, as in we're just here to have fun.
Okay.
But a movie like this, unfortunately, no. But that does not mean, I want to make this very clear to the audience. Justin and I have already talked about this a little bit, but I want to make this very clear to the audience. That does not mean this movie doesn't have some things in it that is, it's worth checking out at least once and whatnot. But I will say, for the most part of this movie, I'm sitting there going, I didn't hate it, but I didn't hate it for it being a movie. But I was like, man, even at 1 hour and 22 minutes, I was like, I'm ready for this to be over.
Well, that's one thing, is like when it decides to be over, it just ends, kind of, right? It's like
it really does. And I don't remember exactly how they say it, but I mean, like, if I had to paraphrase the ending, spoiler alert,
like you can spoil it like this.
Yeah, they're kind of like sitting there going, well, that was something that just happened, and it was not a good thing that happened. And you're like, what do we do now?
Let's go get a coffee. There's wasn't there a cafe over there? Let's go get a coffee. Basically, it's like, and the movie seems to almost want to get out of its own skin that way too. It's even sometimes and they are kind of sexist stereotypes of the male and female couple that they have, and but it seems like for at least the second half of the film, they keep trying to bust out into just kind of go and do their own thing. Let's go out and get a date. This is what we're aiming for anyway. So, and anytime there's a lull in the action, even if it's like right after the monster's on the table, it's being, it's the scene, like in King Kong where they've got King Kong restrained, let's go out and have a date. It's like, really? You just right now? It's like, and at the end of the film, they just kind of do that. That's the end of the film. So yeah, it's crazy that way. And I love absurdities kind of like that. And some of these movies, they'll find new ways to play on the same old on the same old tropes that you expect. So there's the boring ones, the ones that I would consider like not really all that worth even for B movie watching, are the ones that don't even fail in interesting ways. But this one at least found a few. It's not I wouldn't say it's the most, but we'll get into our summary review later. But to start off with, let's dig into the idea of ethnic stereotyping and sexism. Because didn't you say, I think you said, Ryan, once when we were watching Roman Holiday, how respectful the film was of the Italian people, right? It did a good job of not I remember this. And it was true. It did a good job of just portraying the culture as it was. It's like no need to amp it up and go into Super Mario territory, right? Well, I think I know what happened to all the stuff that they didn't do. A lot of it ended up here, didn't it?
Yep.
It's like if you've never taken Italian, you might think after watching this, is like if this is your first exposure to Italian, all you got to do is take English and add an A to everything. And that's it.
Pretty much.
And move your hands a lot, because that's what Italians do.
The only thing that wasn't stereotyped was the names, because those are actual Italian names. I would say this is also a bit of a stereotype, or at least a bit of a prejudice and everything. So in this movie, as Justin has already pointed out, America sent off this rocket to Venus. It comes back, it lands in Sicily, or on the outskirts of Sicily and everything. And then, like, you're dealing with one American general, the guy who was a part of the team. And those are like your two main Americans in this movie.
Yes.
Okay, I need to make this very clear. Those are your two main Americans in this movie. For some reason, and this happens in a lot of older films, Joan Taylor's character, Marissa Leonardo, has a very American accent. Like I don't think they said anything about her.
They didn't.
Being from America.
But her father is definitely portrayed as an Italian. And it's like, and yet here she is, his daughter, and there's no word mentioned about, well, maybe she studied abroad. Maybe she actually picked up, but then even then you'd have some kind of maybe a little bit of a mixed accent, maybe less Italian sounding, maybe slightly less, or some gradation of shade of gray in between, but none of that, because they don't get into that at all. And in fact, they don't get into the main American guy's background either, except for the fact that he was a guy on this mission. And that he knows a lot about the alien creature because he was there when they collected it, they observed it. You don't know except these bare bones facts that don't really tell you about their character. So when you see them acting, later, it's like, no, they're really that vapid and clueless apparently, because they don't even bother with giving them personalities, and let alone accents. But they don't even bother giving them personalities except for kind of the stereotypical ones.
Well, the only thing I'll add to that too is oftentimes, and maybe people already know this. But oftentimes when stereotypes are discussed, like 90% of the time, maybe more, what you unfortunately get from that is also the characters in the movie or in the story that is very heavily stereotyped, is those characters are inherently dumb. It is unfortunate because, like, there are some scenes in this movie, you're sitting there watching a character react to the situation, and you're thinking to yourself, why would you do that? And it's like, oh, wait, it's because you're a dumb Italian. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. That's what you're supposed to just be led there to believe, is that this person is not smart because they're not American, and that is why they're doing this really dumb thing.
I mean, at one point they have some of the Italians later on will refer to, the rocket as a rocket, or what was they say? It was, there's a very stereotyped Italian character who says, the ship of the air, referencing the rocket ship, as if by this point the whole world hadn't known of what a rocket ship was. It's like, but they contradict themselves later and have some of the Italian characters say, the rocket ship or the airship, whatever you want to call it, it was more sophisticated than, oh, look, the ship of the air. I'm like, that's just one example, guys. That's just one example. But it does have the unfortunate side effect of, or maybe the intended effect, for all I know, is like, it goes along with the sexism, the superiority complex of having to make sure that the Americans are the smartest ones around, just by virtue of them being American. There are no dumb Americans in these films, folks. Very rarely. Not in the sense that they mean it, at least. So
yeah.
But the other thing that, of course, if you have the ethnic stereotypes, you're probably going to also have the sexist stereotypes. And of course, they have that in spades here too. I struggled remembering what the name of the woman's character was, because they refer to her less by her name than they do by the stupid moniker that the hero gives her, because in the beginning there's always that kind of clash where they're kind of at odds with each other. But he gives her this derisive nickname. He's like, the almost doctor. Hey, almost doctor, because she kind of lets it slip that she didn't say she's a medical student. She says, I'm almost a doctor. Well, I'm almost a doctor. Yeah. Which kind of just sets him up for being dismissive that way. And then that becomes kind of her name. I counted at least 3 times when in the first half of the film where he refers to as almost a doctor. And it's like, wow, and it goes hand in hand with that whole dismissive. Women are, we can appear to give them intelligence and status up to a point, but we always have to make sure that they're put in their place, right? They have to be put in their place. And this is clearly part of that.
You're right. Even how they introduce her, his first thing is like, you're a nurse, go get me the actual doctor. And she's like, I am the actual doctor on this right now. And that's where all this starts to play out, is this idea of like, oh, you're not a doctor yet and everything.
Yeah.
It's just, and that, I hate to say it, but man, that's like the most memorable part of a forgettable plot.
There's a scene where they've cornered the creature in this barn, and it's only memorable mostly because of a character quirk, or not even a character quirk. It's more of an immediate contradiction when something between what a character says and what they do is so glaring, and they're taking it so seriously. This is not like an airplane movie, right? If this is the Zucker brothers, an airplane, it would be, oh, that's hysterical, and it is still funny. But it's funny in an unintentional way, is that here he is. He's saying he's been to Venus. He's seen these creatures in action. He says they're really quite peaceful unless they're provoked. Now watch as I provoke it, first with a stick, then as I beat it with a shovel, and then I'll follow that up with a gun. And of course he gets angry because you're provoking him. You knew this would happen. And I'm like, and you watch that, it's like, oh, come on, dude. If that's not, I know that's not intentional, but how could you not see that even as you're typing the words in the script?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Okay, so that leads me to something that I've been wanting to say. So I have been on a hard sci-fi kick recently because of a book I've been listening to through audiobook and everything. And it's hard sci-fi. And if you don't know what hard sci-fi is, for anybody out there, hard sci-fi is when you actually get even if it doesn't, actually add up and everything, but you get explanations. You get actual scientific some type of scientific explanation to what is happening in the story that is a sci-fi story. And none of anything that happens makes a lot of sense. Like if you're that kind of person, you'll definitely be mad at this movie. This giant ship lands in the ocean outside of Sicily, does not cause much of anything. They're just kind of like, they look over and they're like, oh, that just happened. Okay. A child is able to, now this part, the only plausible part is like something, as it fell into the earth and crashed, things got blown apart or blown out. But a child picks up what is likely biohazard, probably has a bunch of radiation on it, just picks it up willy-nilly, takes it out of its container, and then gives it to a roadside doctor who is the father of, not a doctor.
Is not the father of not a doctor. The doctor whose daughter is not, that guy.
And again, what we know about space has a lot of radiation in it. That would be something that you probably don't just, touch,
right off the bat.
Don't. And again, I know, monster movie, it's not really concerning itself too much with that. I get it.
At all.
But I mean, it's just like, there's like other little things about that. The monster itself, like they tell it, it's like, they say something in the movie. They're like, why isn't it being affected by something that we're doing or something like that? And they're like, oh, it doesn't have a heart and it doesn't have lungs. And you're like, how is this thing moving?
How is it moving? And then not only moving, Ryan, but almost in the same scene that they reveal that bit of plot or that bit of data for the audience, You then see Ray Harryhausen's work, the creature itself, on the table, whose chest is heaving up and down. Now, if it's not, and so they also mentioned, by the way, that it doesn't have lungs. It doesn't have lungs, and it doesn't breathe air. So, but yet somehow, his chest is heaving up and down. It's like, did no one tell Ray Harryhausen? Did no one give him a copy of the script? Or was the script keep changing, one of those deals? I don't know what it was, but it's another one of those moments in contrast where you're talking about the thing, but the thing you're looking at is not the thing you're talking about. It's right here. I can see it moving. I can see it breathing. It's clearly not the same.
Now, to make this clear to anybody that's going to go watch it, the thing grows. Like it continuously grows throughout the movie, which that's fine. But there's like a couple times in this movie, especially in that scene where it's on the lab table and everything. That thing is huge. And when I say huge, I'm talking like there's at one point it's like, okay, this thing is like Godzilla size at this point. No, it's not. It's just, they didn't scale it the way they should scale it. So there's a couple times where it looks like it's slightly bigger than a human. And there's a couple other times where it looks like an actual dinosaur. That's not going to take you out of it fully. There's just going to be like, the lack, in my personal opinion, the lack of plot and the inconsistencies with actual science. That's what took me out of this movie.
One more bit on the sexism, because the other sexist trope that they do that kind of bugs me even more so was the fact that, first of all, he was the jerk, but then she apologizes for the conflict that followed, which is always a bad sign. And then you have this instant transformation into being a domestic. She, to the point where there's a line like somewhere, it's like she's actually right on the heels of her asking another doctor, is like, is this 7 cc's? First of all, if you're almost a doctor, you would know what 7 cc's is. But then she goes to Link Heartthrob and goes over to him and says, I'd love to get away. It's like, I've been slaving over a hot beast all day. You really said that. You made your work, your professional science work, sound like domestic homework. Like you're a domestic at home. But you just happen to have a lab coat. The fawning and submissiveness, some of these things feed into toxic tropes. Is the toxic things like, see guys, just because they say no, just means you have to be more insistent with them, right? And that's kind of the more dangerous side of all this. I just want to make that clear. There's a part of this that's very serious that these movies do sometimes, and this one does play into that, where it's like, just because the woman is refusing you now, all you have to do is be more obnoxious, more persistent, and more what's the word I'm looking for? More forceful. And the woman will come around because that's what she wants? ? And that's a scary thing. I just wanted to make sure that if anyone's going into this and it gets reacted by that kind of thing, it is in there a little bit. It's not the worst situation I've seen of it, but it is a somewhat disturbing trend among these movies. So if I would say it's like, just take it with that in mind. Let's talk about, the film does kind of at some point want to feel like it's at one point especially early on, it wants to make you think that it wants to make you feel sympathy for the creature. Did you get that too?
I think so, a little bit. And the reason why I say that is because it does come across like, hey, look, this is just like a creature being a creature. And if it's, if you, like we've already mentioned before, if you attack it, then that's the way to like provoke it. For the most part, it's just kind of like walking around and doing its own thing. It goes to the farm and, it doesn't really it doesn't do anything. Actually, that's a big thing in this movie. This is something that we got to make note of. This thing is not a carnivore. It likes and eats flour. Sulfur. I thought, well, maybe it's sulfur. I thought it was flour.
I think they mentioned about sulfur. Yeah.
It eats a, an organic material, that is, or non-meat material. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's,
it almost seems like it eats inorganic stuff. If it wants to hang out in sulfur pools, it's attracted by the raw sulfur, which don't ask me why it prefers this, processed sulfur in a bag to the sulfur pits it had found naturally on its own. Don't ask me about that. But it seems to be, like you said, it actually passes up a whole bunch of livestock, where in other films that other films of this type would have it going and munching on livestock left and right. You'd see dead cows everywhere. That was kind of one of the other things you see in these movies. But here it's like completely peaceful that way. It's not out to get anybody. And it seems like they're going for that angle, that kind of that ET-ish kind of misunderstood alien angle. And it could have been, and those movies can be effective. They can really, and some of them can pull at your heartstrings a little bit. It's like, oh, I feel bad. But for those movies to work, some part of humanity has to be shown as dark side. And in this movie can't have that. It's just too obsessed with having the good old, great white hope American military come in and be the good guys and defeat but militaristically. To have that become the theme for too long before they come in and ruin all that and decide, like, no, we are totally justified in our violent reaction against this thing because we provoked it and then we got angry and now we have to kill it. So if you're looking for something that way, it's like it could be a little bit infuriating that way too. So what are you going to rate this, Ryan?
Oh, I'm probably in the nuke the fridge territory. You can't take away, like, the thing I liked about this movie a whole lot was the technological trying, how they tried with it. There are some really, really good shots. There are some, like, the claymation is just, the claymation is immaculate. If you're watching from far away, and by that I mean, like, if you're not, like, up close to the screen, if you're watching from far away, there's there's one scene where the creature is attacking a human. Well, what they did is they actually created like a claymation human in that little area, in that little spot. But I'm like, if you're pretty far away, you can't super tell that it's, the human is claymation. I thought that was really done. So like it's made with enthusiasm. The plot is just so not there. Like, I don't care about the plot. I will never care about the plot. When I watch monster movies, I generally don't care about the human characters. Like, I really wish, now this is a little side note, but it's a part of this. I really wish Godzilla movies and Kong movies would just get away from the humans altogether. That's me personally. But like, that's what I like about this movie is like what they try to do with the technology they have at the time.
Yes.
I think they do it well, but everything else in that movie is just bad.
Yeah, I mean, for within the limits of the technology at the time, I mean, Ray Harryhausen was in charge of all that, and anyone who's listening to the name, if you're familiar with the name Ray Harryhausen at all, it's because he was a master at this kind of work, and you see it. It's like he's working at the peak of his game. Here, it's like all the perspective shots line up. He's basically lining up his stage, his claymation stage, with a projected screen behind it, and he's doing all the perspective. He's got his perspective down. So yeah, it's I don't blame him for the problems of the film. His work is the best part of the film, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, this is a nuke the fridge for me. Definitely, it's not a strong nuke the fridge. If I would have to rate it a little bit more, if you're into those kind of movies, then I would kind of mix that with a kind of like put it in a museum. You could pull this out every now and then. So once every few years, if you're into this kind of film, that's what you're dealing with. So, okay, Ryan, so tell us what we're going to be doing next week. It's a very different film, isn't it?
Yeah, we are going completely opposite end of the spectrum here, and our next film will be, drumroll, famous high school book turned into movie, To Kill a Mockingbird, starring Gregory Peck.
Yes. And this is one I am completely behind the times on. I am so looking forward to seeing this. And I think this is one I've been meaning to catch up on for a very long time. Glad to finally be able to do so. Anything else you want to say, Ryan?
Yes. Go watch monster movies that actually
are actually good. Yeah.
20 years before this movie was made. Well, I don't know, maybe 10 years or 9 years. I don't know. But in the same time frame that this movie was made, this very important, incredible film called Godzilla came out. Go watch that movie.
Go watch Godzilla. Yeah. Anyway, folks, that's our show for this week. We'll see you next week. And until then, have a good one. Thanks.